So, today I want to talk about people being denied medicine because they could theoretically become pregnant. Now, on some level, there are no adequate words to introduce this topic. The idea that one could be denied medication that could save one's life simply because one's body has the capacity to get pregnant should be something universally understood as absurd and wrong. Unfortunately, this is something that both exists and not even remotely new, as it actually happens quite often. Certain forms of medical care have always been kept behind testing and the concern of a potential pregnancy. That said, with Roe v. Wade having recently been overturned, there's a lot of fear that we could see an increase in the types of medications kept by doctors from people who are capable of getting pregnant or people who are presumed to be capable of getting pregnant, whether that is true or not. Now, either out of personal moral belief or because of fear of the law, doctors are quite capable of removing one's access to medication simply because of the effects it could have on a theoretical, fictional embryo or fetus that is never even likely to come into being in the first place. This practice is done in a manner that is condescending and rarely, if ever, even seems to consider the living, breathing person that is sitting in front of said medical professionals. Now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, emboldened opinions by some doctors and fear of the law from others is likely to make things a lot worse. So let's take a look at what's going on. But before we do, I just want to take a moment to put out a general content warning here, because this is going to deal with issues around pregnancy, and I mean a lot of issues around pregnancy, as well as discussions of medical gatekeeping and a lot of trauma as well as suicidal thoughts. So just keep that in mind, and with that understood, let's jump right in. Now, we start off with an article from Jezebel that talks about a New York woman that says she was denied highly effective medication for a chronic painful condition that caused her to contemplate suicide because her neurologist told her she could become pregnant, and the medication might cause birth defects, even though she never plans on having children. Now, mind you, because of everything that she's gone through, her hypothetical pregnancies would be high risk. The risks to her hypothetical fetus, however, still trumps her debilitating pain. When the person had asked if the issue preventing her from getting medication is solely that she's of childbearing age, and, quote, if I were like through menopause, would this be effective for cluster headaches? When the doctor said yes, the patient had said, so the only thing that's kind of stopping this is the fact that at some point in my life, I could get pregnant. In response, the doctor changed the subject. Now, when we look a little further into this story, we actually find that in another video that this person had put out on TikTok that includes the audio of the visit, we hear the doctor ask, so you're not having intercourse? When the patient had clarified that she is, he responds, well, you could get pregnant. The point is if you get pregnant, what are you going to do? You can't deny the fact that you could get pregnant. Even if I'm not planning on it, the risk is low. This is my plan of action. Further, he added that for any treatment that this person is considering that could affect potential pregnancies, if she's, quote, with a steady person, you'd have to bring him in as well. Prior to when the recording had started, the doctors started talking about the possibilities of an unplanned pregnancy from certain less than desirable outcomes. And this ended up having a very traumatizing effect on her because she is a survivor of sexual violence. So yeah, this is an absolutely horrific story. And the fact of the matter is that there's been legal stuff put out against this particular woman because she has spoken out against it. And there is no reality, like I've mentioned before, in which a licensed medical professional should be prioritizing this theoretical fetus that could exist sometime in the future, let alone an actual one, over the needs of the quite real and tangible person sitting right in front of them. Imagine just having your pain ignored, and imagine being denied the highest quality of medicine available simply for having a specific organ in your body. Worse yet, one that this person does not even have the desire to use, likely due to the chronic pain that they already experience. Can you imagine the further pain that going through a pregnancy would cause this individual? And while this is a terrible situation no matter where it happens, there is an added layer of frustration given that this doctor is doing this in the state of New York, a state that has made no changes to its abortion laws since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Meaning that this doctor's likely been doing this for a long time. This is what I mean, that a lot of the moral beliefs of doctors, especially when it comes to what should happen to a pregnancy, come into play because part of this person's plan was to have an abortion, and their partner was considering a vasectomy to make sure that she was safe. And that was just completely overruled and ignored, because what will happen to that potential pregnancy if I give you this medication that will make your quality of life that much better? And while this has been an issue for a long time, as I mentioned, things are getting worse. Roe v. Wade, having been overturned, has made it so that a lot of pharmacies and doctors have been denying access to certain medications that could also potentially cause an abortion. So we'll start off with here in an interview with Slate Podcast that an OBGYN and fertility doctor had said that pharmacists in her area do not want to fill prescriptions for misoprostol. Now, this is kind of unsurprising given that misoprostol is one of two medications that are used to medically induce abortion. So the drug is actually commonly used to prevent stomach ulcers, but it can also be used to induce labor. Now, if it's done and used in a certain fashion. Now, the physicians are afraid to use it because if they do, it might be assumed that they're providing their patients an abortion, and a lot of pharmacists don't want to provide the medication. Now, it's also worth noting that physicians sometimes use misoprostol to soften the cervix of a patient who isn't pregnant before performing a gynecological procedure, such as inserting an IUD or examining the inside of the uterus. Now, misoprostol is also one part, again, of this medicinal abortion, which accounts for more than half of abortions performed in the US. So when Texas pharmacists, because of the laws that are now there, see a prescription for this, there's definitely hesitation, said a clinical assistant professor at the University of Texas College of Pharmacy. It's turning to a colleague and saying, "How do you feel about filling this? Would you fill this?" So the fact of the matter is that they're afraid of losing their jobs, and that fear of the law and what effects that it could have, not just on their jobs, but also potential arrests or potential fines. There's a lot that goes into that, where state violence is being used to manipulate a lot of these doctors into not providing this medication. So somebody could have ulcers and could be denied access to this medication. And misoprostol is not the only medication that's been affected. In fact, a medication that's used for lupus, cancer, and arthritis has also been affected. We have here that reports have emerged that pharmacies are denying access to methotrexate, a drug often used in patients with arthritis or cancer. In very high doses, MTX, it is used to terminate an ectopic pregnancy after miscarriage. Again, an ectopic pregnancy is one that will definitely not come to term, and there are still Republican lawmakers out there who are trying to make it illegal to get ectopic pregnancies. This still exists, and it's getting more and more disturbing as we're going forward. The fact is, though, that this medication can help with the ectopic pregnancy. Now, the drug can also lead to birth defects. It's happening all over, said a professor of pharmacy at North Dakota State University in Fargo. Pharmacists are reluctant to dispense it, and rheumatologists are reluctant to prescribe it because they're afraid of going to jail. Meanwhile, a patient who takes MTX for lupus recently tweeted that her physician's office stopped prescribing the drug because it is considered an abortifacient. I had care that made my disabled life easier, and the Supreme Court, took that away from me. Now, doctors in general are becoming afraid to prescribe anything that is teratogen. So this term here, teratogen, is a reference to anything that could have a negative effect on an embryo or prevent it from growing in any way, shape, or form, or just otherwise mess with it. Now, so we'll come back to that term because that term is going to show back up here. Now, if we look further into this particular case, she explains how it helps her, the medication. It helps suppress my immune system and has significantly increased my ability to move and my stamina in my joints. I can go more consecutive days without pain than before, and on days I'm in pain, it isn't as severe as it was. The person who's in the process of now transitioning to a new medication said she now expects increased disease activity, explaining sudden medication changes can cause flares of the disease. This is lupus. So, a lot of what I'm doing now is preparing for that to happen. So, because of the effects that happened here, because of the change in the law when it comes to Roe, this person who has lupus now may have to deal with an extreme amount of pain. If you see the pattern here, it's because it keeps happening. And it's starting to become ridiculous how often that we're seeing these cases. In fact, there's another situation where a 48-year-old woman without a uterus at all from Tennessee, where there's a 6-week abortion ban in place, didn't think that the ban would affect her because, well, she doesn't have a uterus. But because she's perceived to have a uterus, because of the way our society deals with things, she said that she's been taking methotrexate for her inflammatory arthritis since April, and on July 1st, the first time since getting her prescription, her pharmacy required her to call her doctor to access a refill she was already prescribed. She had said that she went without medication for 3 days until she could speak to her doctor after the long 4th of July weekend. And again, going without medication for a few days is going to have very painful impact on the body, even with the arthritis. And this is what we're seeing. Like another example, same medication. A person had decided to get sterilized so that they could go back on the medication that had relieved her disabling pain from rheumatoid arthritis for the last 8 years. This person said after the Roe v. Wade decision, if she wanted to stay on the treatment of choice for her condition, a drug called methotrexate, she was told she had to go on birth control despite her age and history of infertility. So, again, instead of going on birth control, this person had decided to sterilize themselves, even though they have a history of infertility. And so we're constantly seeing this. And it's worth noting that methotrexate is just the tip of the iceberg, according to Tracy Poole, a practicing pharmacist and faculty member at Belmont University College of Pharmacy in Nashville. If you're of childbearing age, are you going to be denied medications that could potentially interfere with a pregnancy? And that brings us back full circle to the original point that was made and the original story, which is that any medication that could be conceived as a potential threat to a fictional fetus could be barred from use, which includes some very commonly prescribed life-saving medications, including things like antibiotics. And that's really disturbing. We have here reports that talk about how some antibiotics are known to be teratogenic, and they should be avoided entirely during pregnancy. These include streptomycin and kanamycin, which may cause hearing loss as well. These are the types of medications that we're talking about that could end up being affected in the long run. We might have a situation where ibuprofen and other medications in its class might actually be not allowed. No medication is safe in all circumstances for all pregnancies. Every drug a person takes carries some risk, and ibuprofen is no exception. Research has established that ibuprofen can be risky after the midpoint of pregnancy, which is about 20 weeks. The FDA advises against using ibuprofen after this point in pregnancy because doing so may damage the fetus's kidneys, causing low amniotic fluid. So, yeah, you could have any other NSAIDs, including things like acetaminophen, and aspirin. You could basically get a whole bunch of just common over-the-counter pain medications that are not allowed to be taken when one's pregnant, or perceived to be pregnant, or even could theoretically be pregnant. Because by doing so, you might accidentally cause some sort of harm to the potential embryo that doesn't even exist yet. Now, we move on and we have antidepressants as the next one. While doctors don't believe antidepressants cause birth defects, you'd think that would put it in the clear, it's still possible for them to affect the baby. Nope, if it's going to affect the potential baby, then we can't have that going either. It's important for a mother and her doctor to know the risks. About 30% of babies whose mothers take SSRIs will experience neonatal adaptation syndrome, which can cause increased jitteriness, irritability, and respiratory distress, difficulty breathing, among other symptoms. Doctors aren't sure whether this effect is due to the baby's withdrawal from the SSRI after birth or exposure to the drug itself before birth. It may be distressing and cause some pediatricians to run tests, but it will go away, said this person, pointing out that the symptoms also sometimes occur in babies whose mothers don't take SSRIs. Now, again, while I'd love to say that this is a new phenomena produced by the recent Dobbs decision and the overturn of Roe v. Wade, that's hardly the case. As an example, we have another case from 2021 where we can see the exact same kind of mentality coming into play. A person who has chronic back pain battled excruciating aches during their most recent pregnancy, so she turned to painkillers prescribed by her doctor, hoping for relief. She took opioid painkillers, and the opioid was shown to be tested for positive by the baby, and now the person is dealing with potential prescription fraud. And so that's a felony charge in their state, and so that's what's going on. And this is in 2021 while Roe v. Wade was still on the books. Now, the trouble is that this type of behavior and this type of medical practice was all too common even when Roe was the law. This paternalistic denial of care towards those who are perceived to be able to become pregnant and the medical control of their bodies in search of any sort of care is absolutely absurd and wrong. And while all I can offer to you all is anecdotal stories of my own experiences or those that have been shared with me, the denial of medical care for the presumption that one has a uterus or the capacity to become pregnant, and that they'll even want to use it one day and actually become pregnant. Because there's an all too common belief that every person who has the capacity to become pregnant will naturally want to do so, which is not true, and I can't believe that has to be said. Over the years, I've come to know people who've had really terrible experiences. And I've known people who sought hysterectomies only to be denied by doctor after doctor because they, quote, may change their minds at a later date, or maybe their partner will want children one day, like that first person that we talked about today in New York. There's circumstances and situations where you're asked to have a partner come in and sign paperwork because the man in your life might actually want to have kids one day and you wouldn't want to be able to take that from him. It's weird how it's framed, and it's disgusting how it's framed. And, I've also heard countless tales of doctors, asking these, again, spouses and boyfriends to sign waivers, even in states where that's not required. I've heard stories of patients being denied basic medical care like x-rays because a person might be lying about being pregnant and having to get pregnancy tested just to get an x-ray. I can't even put that into words how infuriating that is. I've encountered people in my life who have been required to take a pregnancy test to get medical care despite not having a uterus because their word was not taken and they had to have proof that the person was not pregnant in that moment, even though they presented medical records stating that they had had a hysterectomy. These are the types of situations that I just keep hearing about. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This doesn't even delve into the worst cases of it all. And now things are only getting worse. With Roe in place, and doctors were given permission by the state to manage and gatekeep medical care up to a certain point during the pregnancy. And so it was up to the doctor's discretion, but there were general rules. And for the most part, if you were unhappy with one doctor, if you had the luxury to do so, you could go to another one and more or less find what you needed. It may have taken several doctors, but there would probably be one more or less able to provide the care for you if that was something you were fortunate enough and lucky enough to find. Like, sometimes you were in a situation or place where that's not available. But theoretically, you could do that. But now that things are changed and Roe has been overturned, things are uncertain for these very same doctors and pharmacists, and they're panicking about losing their licenses to the point that they're not treating the illness in front of them. This is, of course, assuming that the doctors don't have additional personal or religious motivational factors influencing their decisions in a way that's now perhaps been emboldened by Roe being overturned. Perhaps the medical institution that they were a part of had prevented them from enacting the full extent of their policy and their beliefs, but now that Roe's overturned, they've changed their tune. This is happening. And in either case, people are having their lives put in jeopardy and being denied life saving medication because a hypothetical fetus trumps debilitating pain in living, breathing people. So, with that said, if you've enjoyed what you learned here today or you were able to just take all this in, I hope you'll consider liking the video, subscribing, as well as leaving a comment and joining my Discord, where we do often have political conversations like these. If you're in a financial place to do so, and only if you're in a financial place to do so, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, especially as political content like this can often be demonetized on YouTube. The links for everything that I mentioned are in the description down below. With that said, my name is Anarchist Tara. Thank you so much for watching.